Hi guys, welcome to the Calorimetry lab for physics. So the aim of this experiment is to determine the specific heat of different types of metal samples. So in this case I'm using these two. You can use a whole bunch of different types, these are just the two I've got here. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need in this experiment are your two metal samples, but you'll also obviously have thermometer, retort stand, beaker with boiling distilled water, make sure it's distilled, hot plate, calorimetry cup. It should have a little insert in it, looks like this. Should also be a thermocouple attached and a digital thermometer. Any water you use in this experiment must be distilled, so only use water that comes out of a container that looks like this. Do not use tap water at all. You run the risk of corroding the samples and, frankly, distilled water only. Okay? Cool. I've cheated. I've already got some water in there. It's heating up. But it is pretty slow to heat up. The hot plates are not the fastest things in the world, so if you use a kettle to speed things along, distilled water only, but either way, get your water boiling as soon as possible. Okay, so loosen the handle, drop your thermometer in. Whenever you go to lift anything in or out of the beaker, make sure you've got the thermometer out of the way. They're pretty easy to break, so just bear that in mind. Make sure you have enough water to fully cover both samples, fully submerged, even after some of the water evaporates. So plan ahead. All right. And also plan ahead, make sure you can read the thermometer. There we go. Okay, so first thing you're going to need to do is weigh these. After you've done that, put them both in. As you'll see here, I'm using the strings to lower them in because boiling water. Make sure they're fully submerged. You can lie them down if you want, and make sure these strings are hanging out the side. If you do lose one of the strings, don't worry about it, we will supply tongs so you can rescue it later. Cool. Alright, so we'll just leave those to heat up a bit more before we do anything else. So whilst you're waiting for those to heat up, remove the insert from your lovely calorimetry container. This is the bit it refers to when it says measure your calorimetry cup. Not the whole thing, just the insert foam cup. So weigh this empty, bring it back, distilled water again. Okay. Alright, as before, make sure you have enough distilled water in there to cover your sample fully submerged, and bear in mind you will need to change water between samples and do this whole section over again. Okay, so we'll just put the cup back in there. Now that you can see the front of the hot plate, you can see the switches. So we have the on-off switch, we have the stirrer. You're not using that in this experiment, so just leave that turned off. And then you'll have the heat dial, which will either be low through to high, or it'll be in degrees Celsius. Either way, leave it in the highest setting possible. So the next thing you need to do whilst your samples are still heating up is measure the temperature of the water. So make sure you've got this little probe here. Tuck that into the water, make sure it's measuring the water and not the air in the cup. And make sure it's also not coiled up at the bottom, so it's just in the water proper. Okay. Take the other end of the thermocouple. You'll notice it has a skinny end and a fat end, and plug that into the digital thermometer. Okay, make sure it's oriented the right way up, otherwise see, it won't fit. So on-off button. I've plugged it into T1, so make sure you've pushed T1. And this button up here in the top right, 0.1 to 1 degrees, it'll just make your reading a little bit more accurate. So push that, put it down, put the lid on, be a bit quicker about this than I've been, and wait for the temperature to stabilize. So mine stabilized pretty quickly there because it's room temperature water. This is called reaching thermal equilibrium. So record this, you'll need this as your initial temperature. Okay. Once that's done and your samples are hot, make sure you record the temperature on the thermometer and then remove one sample at a time. So I'm going to take this one. Okay, try not to spill water on the hot plate and transfer it pretty quickly into the cup. Then put the thermometer back in, make sure it's not touching the bottom of the cup, make sure it's not touching the metal sample, and obviously it's fully submerged. So lid on, and then wait for it again to reach thermal equilibrium. So temperature's rising there. Okay, it can take a few minutes to reach thermal equilibrium, so we'll just pretend it has. Then when it has, record that. You'll obviously need the final temperature. Then remove the sample, put it on some paper towel. So I've got some over here. Okay, and then you'll need to remove the cup, empty this, put new distilled water in, weigh it again, and then repeat it with the other sample.